Hello guys, my name is Piyush and my roll number is 2510999078. In this video, I'll explain my previous version and my updated version of the code in which I have used the advanced concept of object-oriented programming such as abstraction, encapsulation, and polymorphism. The main goal of our system is to make our system more modular, reusable, and scalable with more advanced and efficient features. So I'll explain my code by comparing it my previous version. As you can see on right side, it's the advanced code which I have created or the new version which I have created now. And on left side, this is my old version which I have previously explained. These both the codes are quite similar, only a few basic concepts I have introduced new in both of them. Firstly, as you can see, I have introduced a t print, which is the which is the named which is the named constant which I have introduced, which help us to select a particular option in the menu interface. Moving further, we can see the account class in both the cases are same. Here the major change I have made is I have inherited the withdraw transaction class. As you can see, in earlier version, withdraw transaction class has own implementation and own logic, but in our case, the withdraw transaction class inherits from the transaction class, which acts as a base class, whereas withdraw transaction class acts as a child class, which inherits all the properties and functions from the base class. Basically, it helps us to make our program more usable and easy to understand. Like in this case, we have used the implemented the fields like execute, reverse, success independently. But in this case, we execute those fields inside the transaction class, which we'll discuss later in this video. Moving further, we can see that in our new program, I have used the concept of execute. Here, basically, I have used base.execute, which execute here we are calling the base method, or here we are calling the base method to perform the or execute the logic instead of writing the logic again and again in our base class. Oh, sorry, in our child class. Inheritance basically is like a centralized system. Like I have an example, like in big showrooms and malls, they use centralized AC to provide ventilation to each and every room. Like that, same as that way, in our program, we use inheritance, which act as a centralized system, which provides all the functions and properties to the other child classes linked or inherited from it. Moving further, we can see that ये तो शुरू Moving further, as you can see, I have also inherited a deposit transaction class from the main base transaction class. They both are execute in the same way. Here we also They both execute in the same way. Here we also created the here we also created it as a child class and passed the base attributes. Moreover, we have set the base class and called the execute method of the base class to set the execute flag to true. Moving further, we have declared a success property which helps the child class or which force the child class to represent or display its values inside the main base class by overriding the properties of the base class. Basically, it restricts the base class by using the abstract keyword from using its properties and allow the child class to use its properties over it. Using the override keyword. Moving further, we can see that I have created a transfer transaction class which also inherits from the transaction class which acts as a base class and Here it overrides or passes the function. It takes the properties and variables from the base class for both the source and the destination account. Moving further, we can see that there is a slight difference between the execute and the rollback class. Here we are calling the execute method from the base class and using the withdraw keyword to execute the base class to execute the withdraw transaction class functionalities. And if the withdraw dot success is successful, means the person has the account and if he or she could withdraw some amount from it, then the deposit dot execute method will also work from the deposit transaction class. As you can see, text as a fields. These are the fields which we have defined in the deposit transaction class. If for any reason, if it is not possible, then it will display transaction transfer failed. And along with that, if the base dot withdraw dot transaction class is also not successful, it will also display the message that insufficient funds are found. Sufficient funds are found, and the method will be overridden. Moving further, we can see that rollback method. Here we are also calling the rollback method of each bank base class to set the reverse flag to true and update the date stamp. Like we can see that it will check the date stamp of the it will note the date stamp at which we roll back the method. In this case, use the deposit of success if it is possible, or if it has executed and will pass to deposit or full work and similar way, etc. etc. And moving further, we can see it will print the base transaction. In this case, I have chosen the common attributes which will be displayed in the base transaction, which will be displayed in the when we call the print method, which is declared in the base class, which we'll see earlier. Now you can see that here I have created the transaction class inside the bank class. It stores all the transactions, help us to print the history and roll back the specific transaction as chosen by the user. Let's suppose if a person wants to add a new transaction type then or want to add a new transaction class, then he doesn't need to create a new class and implement all the functionalities in it. He does just have to create a new class and inheritance from the transaction class, and the inheritance basically it will inherit all the properties and functions from the instance class and overrides all the basic methods which are declared to be abstract or are declared as virtual. Inheritance class has many advantages such as it promotes usability, it helps us to reduce duplication and improve maintainability. As you can see earlier, we have inherited the withdraw, deposit, and transfer transaction class from the transaction class and provide a logical structure, which we'll see when I'll display the transaction class in this program. Moving further, as you can see, here I have created an execute transaction method, which earlier it was, as you can see, earlier we have used the concept of overloading, in which we create three separate methods. We create three separate methods with same name but different parameters, so it acts like it obeys the method overloading concept. But in this case, we have used one method which performs different functions. It resembles to the concept of polymorphism. It is the concept of Basically, it is a concept of runtime polymorphism, where a base class reference can handle the different child class objects. And moving further, we can see that both the core programs are quite similar to each other. This slight difference is there. Now, the print transaction class will display or print all the transactions made by the user whenever it is called by the person. And get transaction. I'll talk about it when I will explain you the after transaction class to make you understand me better. Transaction class. In this transaction class, it is the main functionality of our program. In this class, we have created or implemented all the logics and performed all the operations which will be inherited by the base class. Like as you can see, firstly we have declare amount and date time stamp, which will be executed whenever we call the class as the declare inside the constructor. Moving further, here I am implemented the execute methods which will be overridden by the other base child class, which will be overridden by the child class. And here we have set the reverse to true so that we set it to true so that the transaction cannot be reversed again and will be handled by the so to ensure that the program runs once and to avoid any logical misconception. Now we have and also we have I have implemented the datetime class to get the current datetime time of the conception of the transaction when it is reversed. Moving further, I have declared the successor abstract as discussed earlier. It will be not display the properties or we cannot create an object of the success because it is declared as abstract. We can only use this along with the child class. Basically it helps us to uh, it helps the child class to use its or print its data flexibly. And last here I've declared the common attributes which will be displayed to the user whenever he performs a transaction between accounts. Moving further, as you can see here, the bank system which is quite similar to each other. Only a difference of do print transaction. Here I have added a choice of do print transaction, the menu interface, which the user can choose to print the transaction history, and rest the code is same. Here, yes, rest the code is same as the earlier which I have explained. Yeah. Now I'll explain the do print transaction history method, which will be called whenever the user chooses it. Whenever user chooses the option 6. Firstly, it will whenever it is called, it will display the print transaction history or the common attributes which we have declared earlier using the bank class object. And then it is a plus point of our system. Mostly the bank system doesn't provide it, but our system provides it because if any person wants to roll back the previous transaction, he could be able to do that. So we have provided a feature of reverse rollback in which a person can choose the rollback by seeing from the transaction. A person can choose the transaction from seeing for the transaction history and perform the rollback action on it manually. Like firstly, if a person chooses yes, then it will be set to lower to avoid any error. Then Then he'll enter the transaction number, means the transaction he wants to roll back. Then this transaction will be sent to the get transaction method, which I'll explain you, which I'll talk about earlier. Without and will be handled by using try catch block if any error occurred in between. Now the input will be given to the transaction. Now the input will be given to the get transaction class. Here it will check that the input is valid if the input is greater than 1 and if the input is greater than transaction ground from the or the maximum transaction between the user and made. If it is true, then it will pass to the next method where the user because the index in between the arrays or generic collection start from 0, so it will set the index of the user. It will set the user defined index as the machine or the list index to avoid any error, and perform the transaction rollback method or call the transaction rollback method from the using the transaction using the reference of the transaction class. And if it is successful, then it will print the new transaction that the transaction has been rolled back. Overall, our system is more efficient, scalable, and close to real-world banking scenarios. And this big improvement helps us to make our system more reusable, flexible, avoid duplicacy, and modular. Along with help us, we can also it also becomes more scalable. Thank you.